Hello everyone, today we are going to be looking at section 2 from Linha Curva. Our learning objectives for today's lesson are to gain knowledge of the choreographic content and production features of section 2. Our extra challenge is to begin to link the choreographic intention, the choreographic approach and stimulus to section 2, and our literacy focus is to use dance terminology throughout the lesson when discussing the choreographic content and production features. For our starter task, you now need to watch section 2 of Linha Curva. Whilst watching the clip, I want you to note down what you see. This could be, for example, the number and gender of the dancers or what motif the dancers are performing. Note down as many points as you can, as this will help you throughout the lesson. As we have now watched section 2, I want you to get out or download the section 2 booklet. It should have 5 pages, which consist of the aural setting, the lighting, the staging, the choreographic content and the props, which we will be looking at today. Using the notes you wrote down in the starter task, I want you to spend 3 minutes putting them on the correct pages of the booklet. We are going to start by looking at the staging of section 2. Using the image, I want you to label and describe the set, staging and performance space. Remember to think about the type, the location, the colours, the shape and the backdrop of the performance space. You have 3 minutes. Section 2 is performed on an empty stage and the raised platform where the 4 musicians perform is slightly visible. The lights above the stage shine down onto the dancers, which almost look like twinkling stars. There is black flooring, wings and backdrop, and it is performed on an end stage. At the bottom of the page there should be a box which asks you to highlight if the performance environment suggests a certain aspect. I want you to go through and highlight any of the phrases that you think the staging suggests about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase, bare stage, so that the focus is on the action content, as the audience are focused on the female dancers performing the adage motif. We should now have lots of different ideas for the staging of section 2. Make sure you have written down and highlighted each of the aspects that I have discussed, as well as your own ideas. We are now going to move on and look at the lighting of section 2. Using the image, label and describe the lighting. Remember to think about the colours, the direction, the shape, the effect, the intensity, and any shadows that the lighting creates. You have 3 minutes. In section 2, the lighting is dimmed, initiated by the gong. The 3 lines are lit, but the squares are very low intensity except the yellow. The dancers are positioned in the yellow squares, which could resemble sunny spots. Why do you think Galeli chose yellow-coloured squares for the dancer to perform in? What kind of mood do you think the lighting creates? Think about the choreographic intention and stimulus of the piece. Now go through and highlight if the lighting suggests a certain aspect about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase, shows the time of day, as the yellow-coloured lighting could represent the sun beating down during a Brazilian carnival. You could also highlight mood atmosphere, as a lazy and lethargic mood is presented due to the low-intensity lighting. You have 2 minutes. Next, we are going to look at the aural setting of section 2. I want you to create a mind map to describe the aural setting and the accompaniment. Your extension task is to analyse how the aural setting is used effectively. Remember to think about the instruments, the time signature, the style, the volume, the speed, the music-dance relationships, any silence, and if you can hear any of the dancers' movements. This section is very different in terms of the accompaniment. There is a clear musical change from the fast and furious drum beats to a more mystical mood. The pace really slows down, which contrasts with the aural blast from section 1. The music changes dramatically, dropping to a gentler pace with a mysterious echoing sound. We now hear atmospheric twanging sounds played by the berimbau, which is a traditional Brazilian instrument. We also hear tapping on the drums and a scraping sound. Now go through and highlight if the aural setting and accompaniment suggest a certain aspect about the piece. Think about how this section links to the stimulus. You will also need to look at the music-dance relationships of this section and highlight the correct term. Are the music and dance in direct correlation, or do they mutually exist or disassociate with one another? You have 2 minutes. We are now going to look at the choreographic content of section 2. The movement in this section comes from the named movement phrases developed by the dancers described in the choreographic approach to the piece. First, I want you to describe key motifs from this section referring to the action, space, dynamics and relationships. Secondly, I want you to move on to naming any of the structuring devices and form within this section. Thirdly, I want you to move on to the choreographic devices box, naming any of the devices and where they are visible within section 2. Write down as many examples as you can. An example of a motif for the movement content from section 2 is when it begins with one dancer on the stage, downstage left, who goes into an inverted position from wide second. In this headstand, she sweeps her legs slowly around and stands up fluidly, having turned 180 degrees. For structuring devices and form, this section also uses clear transitions. For example, after the adage is performed starting downstage left and ending on a diagonal facing upstage right, they start the motif facing upstage right and ending on a diagonal facing downstage left. There is a seamless transition between the motif being repeated. For choreographic devices, a female dancer joins a female soloist downstage right. They begin the adage in unison. Cumulative canon is used as the number of female dancers in the space increases to 7. Make sure you have at least another 2 devices written down. There is a lot to analyse in terms of the choreographic content, so make sure these boxes are full of your ideas. Now go through and highlight if the choreographic content suggests a certain aspect about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase enhances mood atmosphere as the movement becomes slow and liquid, as if the dancers are moving against a resistance, which contrasts with the aural blast of section 1. You have 2 minutes. Next, we are going to look at the props from section 2. Using the image, label and describe the prop. Remember to think about the colours, the shape, the object, the style, and the material of the prop. You have 3 minutes. In section 2, 6 skateboards are used to slide some of the male dancers across from stage left to stage right. The male dancers appear to float on their backs across grid rows 2, 4 and 6. The male dancers get pushed across the stage from the wings by their feet. You only get a glimpse of the male dancers as the light is low and not all grid squares are lit. Your final task is to highlight if the prop suggests a certain aspect about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase choreographic intention, as the skateboards inject a bit of mischievous fun even in the slow adage section. You have 2 minutes. Well done for today's work. We have looked at the aural setting, the lighting, the staging, the choreographic content and the props of section 2 from Linha Curva. For your homework, you now need to download and complete the homework table. This homework table asks you to write down how the props, for example, supports the contributions of the piece. The contributions could refer to the choreographic intention, the stimulus, and the choreographic approach. You are required to give your own personal interpretation of the prop, and then how the prop has an effect on the audience.